So how do you qualify to buy a business? Whether you're trying to buy your first business as an entrepreneur, you want to leave your corporate job and become a business owner, or let's say you own a current business and you want to roll up into that existing business, how do you qualify to buy a business? Now, my name's Jordan Keller. I'm a business broker. I help people buy and sell small to mid-sized businesses, and I've been a part of numerous transactions that equate to over millions of dollars in valuation. And before I get into the actual qualifications for buying a business, I personally think the most important part of this is having that drive and that grit and honestly the ambition and the mindset to go through the process, because this is not like real estate where you can close on a house in a month or 2 months. This process takes anywhere from 6 to 9, 6 to 12 months. And so you do have to have the drive to go through the process. You do have to be able to handle your emotions going through that process because it is a lot of ups and downs. Now, with that being said, the actual qualifications for buying a business is mainly going to be around qualifying for an SBA loan, because you can hire a broker or a consultant to help you navigate the process, and you don't need to qualify to have a broker. You don't need to qualify to have somebody consult you, because they'll put you in touch with CPAs and transactional attorneys, and they're going to help you navigate the process. But what you're going to need to qualify for is getting a loan, is financing the deal, unless you're paying 100% out of pocket, which I really wouldn't advise to do. You want to leverage other people's money to buy the asset that's going to cash flow. You're going to use that cash flow to pay back that loan, whether it's from an investor or a bank, right? And so you need to have the qualifications in order to get that loan. And so what are those qualifications? Well, unfortunately, the SBA, which is mainly going to be the loan you're going to use, it's called an SBA 7A loan, and you're going to utilize that to acquire the business. And you only have to put 10% down in order to get an SBA loan, and they'll lend up to $5 million. Now, as I was saying, they don't have 3 main boxes you need to check in order to qualify for the loan. They take a look at the buyer's profile as a whole. They take a look at the situation as a whole. But for the most part, they're going to have a certain amount of standards that they want the buyer to have. And the very first one, if you want to say these are the qualifications, the very first qualification is going to be your credit score. Now, most lenders are looking for a 680 and above for a credit score. I have seen some lenders that will work with a 650, but for the most part, you're going to have a better case if you have a 680 or above. And so I would take a look at your credit score. You obviously don't want to have any derogatory marks, any collections, any negative things on there, and you want to have a 680 credit score or above. Now, the second qualification is going to be obviously money, right? You need some money to buy the business. Now, you can work in an investor into this to help you put some of that 10% down. I've used that strategy myself. I've helped people use that strategy as well, where you're using 10% of capital injection into the project, and you're using that 10% capital injection for your down payment. So you'll just have to show the SBA proof of where that money is coming from and proof that it is there. However, they're still looking at you, the buyer, financial situation, because you're going to be the one who's going to be carrying the loan. Your name is going to be attached to that loan. The investor's name is not going to be on that loan. Anybody who's 20% or less owner in the business will not have to guarantee any portion of that loan. So you are still going to have to qualify in terms of the finances, your financial situation. And so they like to see, one, if you're putting the 10% up, you have to show proof of where that 10% is, so proof of liquid funds. And then they also like to see 8 to 10% of post-close liquidity. And so what that really means is they don't want to see you have $100,000 in your bank account and that's all you have to your name, and you're putting $100,000 as your 10% down payment. They don't want to see you push all your chips into this one project. As admirable as it might be, admirable as it might be, they want to see that you have post-close liquidity, meaning extra funds in your bank account or in assets or equity in a home or equity in other assets. They want to see that you have, like I said, 8 to 10% post-close liquidity in a bank account or other assets. And that leads me into my second thing of they do require a lot of times for personal collateral for the loan, against the loan. And so whether you have equity in your home, whether you own other assets, maybe it's another business or other investment properties or whatever it is, 401k, investment stocks, they want to see that you have other assets in your name. Sometimes they will ask for putting up collateral, example being your home, as collateral to that loan. They want to see that you're putting skin in the game and you're willing to put up collateral to back that loan if needed. Now, I can't really tell you that you need to have a certain amount of equity or a certain amount of assets or a certain amount in your savings or a certain amount in your stocks or for 401k. Like I said, they take a look at the picture as a whole, but credit is one, your financial situation is another one, and so I would always advise having 8 to 10% of liquid funds, not including the 10% down payment as well. That will be the best case scenario. If you have equity in your home and you're willing to put up your house as personal collateral, that is a very good sign as well. So that's the financial situation that they're looking for. I know it's kind of a gray area, but I think you can assess where you're at personally. If you're looking to put 10% down, just make sure you have maybe 8 to 10% and you're willing to put up your home as collateral as well. Or if you own other assets, that will look really, really good as well. Now, I've helped people who buy businesses who don't have collateral, who refuse to put their home up. They put a HELOC on their home and they went to a different bank and they're able to go that route as well. And so there's a lot of different ways that you can go about this. It just depends on the lender that you work with. Sometimes the larger lenders won't be as lenient as maybe some of the smaller lenders. They tend to be more aggressive, more entrepreneurial spirit behind them. So I would look for some smaller local SBA lenders to work with if that's the situation for you. But if you're well off, you have money in the bank, you've got liquid funds, you have assets, you should be okay as far as your financial situation. Now, the next thing that they are going to look for is your experience in the industry you're going after. And what I mean by that is if you're buying a business in a specific industry, they're going to see if you have direct experience. They are obviously going to love to see that you either work in that industry or you have experience in that industry, or maybe the person you're buying the business with is going to be an operator and they're coming from that industry. So if you have direct industry experience, that's going to be the best case scenario. Don't worry if you don't. They are also going to look for what's your background. They're going to request your resume. What have you done previously? Do you have any transferable skills, transferable management skills that would correlate with the business you're trying to buy? And so I've seen examples of people who are managers at certain businesses or they've run teams at the corporate job they're at, and they can transfer those skills into being an owner at the business you're looking to buy, right? I've seen software engineers or engineers who have managed a small team for several years. They've shown a track record of good success, and then they went and bought an HVAC business because the skills it takes to manage a small team as a software engineer are somewhat similar to managing a team at the HVAC business. Now, that's being said that there's a manager in place for the HVAC business who understands the operations of HVAC, if that makes sense. And so that's going to come down to bringing that business and target into play. And like I said, they look at everything as a whole. And so if that's your scenario, then they're going to go turn and look at the business you're trying to buy and say, okay, if you're not going to be the operator of the business, that's totally fine. You have transferable management skills, but who's going to be the manager of the operations or who's going to be running the operations? Let's look at this business now, right? So they tie everything in together. It's not, as I was saying earlier, 3 boxes they need to check and then you're approved. They take a look at everything as a whole. And this is why I always advise to work with the smaller lenders, the more aggressive lenders, the ones that have that entrepreneurial spirit behind them, as opposed to, I'm not knocking on Live Oak Bank, but they're the #1 SBA 7A lender out there. And so they have a lot of people coming to them. And so if you don't check those boxes, they're okay passing on it because they have someone who's extremely qualified that they're willing to give their money to. So it's just assessing your personal situation of where you're at. But I will tell you the best case scenario from an SBA lender's eyes is that you have the 10%, you also have 8 to 10% post-close liquidity, you're willing to put your house up for collateral, you're coming from the same industry you're buying in, and you're going to work full-time in that business. That is the best case scenario for the SBA, which leads me into that last point I just talked about is, what are your new roles going to be in this business? I know a lot of people are looking for absentee businesses, and you can certainly do that without having to work 40 hours a week in the business. I'm just telling you that the SBA, it looks more appealing to them if you're willing to work full-time in that business or take over the current owner's roles. Maybe they oversee marketing or they oversee sales or they just oversee the entire business as a whole, but they're not doing the daily operations or the revenue generating operations of the business. So I would just sit down and assess your situation, because then what they're also going to do is take a look at the business you're trying to buy. they're obviously going to underwrite the deal, and so they have their own underwriting team. They're going to make sure that the business, from a cash flow standpoint, can debt service what you're going to have to pay them back, meaning they want to make sure that the business you are looking to buy makes enough money where you can pay off the debt that you owe that bank and then some. And so they usually look for a debt service ratio of 1.15 to 1.25, and really all that means is that they want to see the business making at least 15% to 25% more than what you owe them in debt payments. And so they're going to take that into consideration. They're going to take your credit score, your financial situation, your experience, your skills, your background, your industry knowledge, and they're going to take a look at everything as a whole and put that together and then make a decision from there. So those qualifications are all tied to the SBA, and I would say those are the qualifications for buying a business, because you need the financing in order to buy the business, unless you're paying all out of pocket or unless you have a private investor who's going to fund the deal for you. Then that isn't necessarily the case. And then it would become more of, are you qualified to run a business? And I think that's where you have to put more emphasis on the operations of the business, maybe the industry that you're looking at. Is it a safe, recession-proof industry? I tend to just break it down as simple as a need versus a want. Are you going into more of an entertainment type of business, or restaurants or bars? Those tend to take a little bit of a dip if the economy takes a dip as well. When people aren't spending money, they're not going to go out and splurge on expensive meals or entertainment, things like that. Now, if the economy takes a dip and their air conditioning goes out, people are still spending the money on that because it's a need, right? So those are the types of things that I would look at as well. So as far as qualifications for buying a business, the majority of qualifications that I would say you need are going to be tied to qualifying for an SBA loan and getting approval from the SBA so you can get their money to buy the business. Now, something that might be helpful that you want to do beforehand, and you can do this at any phase of looking at a business or during the transaction process of a business sale, is going ahead and getting pre-qualified with an SBA lender. And you can just simply go to someone like Live Oak Bank and get pre-qualified. They'll have you fill out your personal financial statements, send in a resume potentially, fill out a few forms, and they will come back and tell you what your purchasing power is, contingent on doing this, 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 and this, right? Contingent on the business debt servicing, contingent on potential assets for collateral, contingent on you putting 10% down and having 8 to 10% liquidity. So they'll tell you the contingencies that they need, and they'll also tell you what your purchasing power can be for buying a business, right? So then you can look at their contingencies and say, okay, I can check all these boxes, therefore I can go find a business that's worth that much. I can meet all these contingencies in order to move forward. If you can't, maybe go look for a more aggressive lender and try and play in that gray area a little bit more, because it's certainly possible. I've helped clients who didn't want to put their home up, as I was mentioning earlier. We worked with a large bank, and they said you need to put your home up for collateral, and he didn't want to do that. And so we worked with another smaller lender, and they told him, hey, if you pull out a HELOC on your home, then we can't ask for collateral because you already have something pulled out on your own home, and we'll just go look in this direction and look for something else and put more emphasis on the business, right? And so there's all these little weird gray areas and loopholes that you can get around things, but you're going to have a better chance of successfully doing that or finding those gray areas with the smaller lenders, in my opinion. But I would say it'd be very advantageous to go get pre-qualified with the lender, just so you know where your purchasing power is at and what any potential contingencies there are, or further things that they would require or request. One last thing I will say that may offset some of those things a little bit more in your favor is finding a business that is very cash flow heavy and has a good debt service ratio. And so the higher that debt service ratio is, the better. So if the business is making a lot of cash flow and maybe not a lot of expenses, and when you incorporate your debts back to the bank, the business is making that gap between what the business makes and what you owe the bank, the bigger that gets, obviously it's better in the bank's eyes, right? So those are the qualifications for buying a business, whether you're a first-time business owner or you currently own a business and you want to roll up into your existing one. There's going to be more emphasis on first-time buyers than there will be on current business owners, because the current business owners will have a track record of owning a business, and hopefully you can show that you have successfully owned a business, and you can show profitable P&L statements or positive trend growth in your current business P&L statements. So that's how you qualify for a business. Everything else outside of qualifications regarding can you do it? I get that question a lot. Is I don't know if I can do this. I don't know if my emotions are getting in the way, or how I can decipher if I can do this or not. That just comes down to removing emotions from the process and looking at the facts. And there's even statistics out there, that 65% of businesses fail within the first 10 years of their of being in business. And so when you hear something like that, you can reduce your risk factor by looking at businesses that are at least 10 years old, right? So then you're coming in and you're not coming into a startup situation. You're coming into a business that's established. They've been around for, call it 12 years. They've been through the ups and downs. And so you're reducing your risk a little bit more by looking for an established business. And so if you have concerns around, can I do this or not? One, you just need to realize you need to make decisions based off facts and not emotions, because I promise you, emotions will rise to the surface several times, and that's when you just need to take a step back, lean on the people that you've hired to help you, whether that's your broker, your consultant, using a CPA, an attorney. Lean on them to put the facts in front of you, and then make a decision based off what they've put in front of you, not the emotions that are boiling to the surface, because like I said, that will inevitably happen at some point several times throughout the transaction process. And you have to just believe in yourself that you can do this, because problems will arise. You might have to hire people, fire people. You may have cash flow problems, as I mentioned in the past, or vendor issues, or whatever it is that comes with running and owning a business. You just have to believe that you can face those problems head on and overcome them, right? So I'll end that video there. If you have any questions around more qualifications for the SBA or buying a business in general, just let me know below. I would be happy to answer them, and I appreciate you watching this video.